Alright, so what I wanted to say was that we have leveled up to episode 12 of Leveled Up Gamers podcast, where we don't get old, we level up. I am Tro, short for Troubadour underscore XP, your host of this 3/4 game podcast and 1/4 movie club. If you are a new listener, and you are enjoying the show or you enjoy it, then we would greatly appreciate that you gave us an iTunes review because this helps our podcast grow and get noticed more. Also, feel free to join us on our Discord channel, which, if you're watching live on Mixer, I am about to post that right now. And if you are listening on the podcast, then you will find the link where you can join our Discord channel in the show notes in the iTunes podcast app. So you can hopefully join us there. But first, let's go ahead and talk about the things we are going to talk about, because apparently that's what I learned in English class. You have to say what you're going to say and then say it. So, today's topics include the free games with gold that are included with various monthly subscriptions, also what I've been playing, and the main thing we're going to be talking about today is the Spider-Man spoiler chat, and I made sure that that's the title of this show or episode. That way you don't get caught off guard and walk into something that you didn't expect to hear before you were meant to hear it. Now, as I mentioned, this podcast is 3/4 gaming podcast and 1/4 movie club. This month, the movie club segment will take place on October 27th, and we will be spoiling the movie The Boy, which is a scary movie you can find on Netflix, and we're going to talk about it on October the 27th. So if you haven't watched that movie, I haven't watched that movie either, but you have time to watch it, and then we can have a discussion about that towards the end of the month. Also, some quick bit of cleanup news. I won't be doing an episode next Saturday because I'm actually traveling to Dallas, where I will be training some teachers on how to become better teachers. So that'll be that is the reason why there will not be a podcast episode next week on Saturday. I actually take off on Tuesday and I don't come back until Saturday late at night. So there's just no time for me to fit that in. But first up, let's talk about the games with gold for the month. So I actually did a little bit of extra research to tell you the dates. So Overcooked is one of the games available for games with gold for you to download, and it's available from October the 1st to the 31st. There's another game called Victor Vran or VRAN. I'm not sure how to pronounce that. He looks very Van Helsing-esque like. That game will be available for Xbox One from October 16 to November 15. For the Xbox 360 games, which you can play on Xbox One, they will be giving away Stuntman Ignition. I bought that game on the 360 and I really enjoyed it. It's a little fun game to waste a few hours of your day every now and again. So that's available on October 1st to the 15th. And for Xbox 360, they're giving Hitman Blood Money, which will be available from October 16 to the 31st. Next up, we have the PlayStation games. If you have the PS Plus, you can download the following games for free. Included with the price of the PS Plus, including Master Reboot on PlayStation 3 and The Bridge on PlayStation 3. The Bridge is available cross-buy with PS4 and PS Vita. Also, Rocket Birds 2 Evolution for PS Vita and 2064 read-only memories for PS Vita. But the two big games for October for PlayStation are Friday the 13th, the game, which fits the theme of scary in October, and Laser League. I played Friday the 13th. I'm not a big fan of it, but I am a big fan of Laser League. It's a fun twist on the laser tag shooter. I like it. You should try that one out. If you have a PlayStation 4, why not? Now, this particular podcast is also going to start announcing games in Humble Bundle. Now, if you don't know what Humble Bundle is actually it's kind of like PlayStation Plus or Xbox Games with Gold, but for a computer. So for $12 a month, you can actually get over $100 worth of games monthly, and you don't have to. You can cancel anytime. It's not like something that you're committed to. So if you don't like next month's games, you can cancel that, or you can keep the subscription going for as long as you want to. This particular month, they are actually going to, for $12 a month, for $12, you will be able to download Hollow Knight, Hitman: The Complete First Season, and 7 Days to Die. Plus, on November the 2nd, they will announce more mystery games. And I've been a subscriber since March of last year. Man, my Steam library is over 300 games right now, and all I paid is just those $12 a month. So if you don't know how to access that, I will post a link in the show notes below. And on Mixer, I'll post a link as well in a few moments. So those are the games being given with Humble Bundle monthly. Really looking forward to playing Hollow Knight. Next up on the list is the following. I have been playing Rainbow Six Siege on Xbox. It's been a while since I played that game, and last weekend I decided to pop it in. I'm thoroughly enjoying some of the new characters that are available on Rainbow Six Siege. There's a character called Alibi, which I believe it's a girl, has the ability to turn on like holograms of herself, and that's exactly what I needed to be good at Rainbow Six Siege. For people to be distracted by somebody else while I'm able to take them down. Greatly, I make a great use of that particular perk from her. There's another what do you want avatar, I guess you can call him that. I don't know his or her name, but he or she has the ability to turn something on their watch, and you can see the movement of the enemies. So I really like those two new characters. Other than that, I actually turned on my Switch. I have not turned my Nintendo Switch for a very long time, but I recently purchased Nintendo Online, so I had to redeem it on Switch. And believe it or not, my wife got curious when she saw me playing Super Mario Bros., a game that was available for Nintendo. So we started taking turns, and now she likes the Switch because of Super Mario Bros. Greatly, a great way to connect with my wife. Other than that, I downloaded Octopath Traveler, the demo. I haven't purchased the game. I was hearing a lot of good things about Octopath Traveler, and it turns out that it's a turn-based RPG that I am enjoying quite a bit. It is a $60 game, and right now I am actually going to wait for a sale to get the full game because I really am enjoying how that game plays. And lastly, I play a lot of Clash Royale on my phone, so that's always on the back burner there. Okay, so now we're going to talk about Marvel Spider-Man. The spoiler chat of Marvel Spider-Man on PlayStation 4 is about to happen right now. So if you have not played the game but you want to play it on your own, or if you are already playing it but you don't want to get spoiled, then maybe you may want to stop listening. However, before you do, I actually divided the spoiler chat into the 3 different acts that you find in the game. So maybe you already made some progress and you're like in Act 1 or in Act 2. You can decide where you want to stop listening. I will make clear announcements before each of the acts. So starting up, we're going to first start with some facts about the game. The full name of the game is actually Marvel's Spider-Man, but some gamers are referring to it as Insomniac Spider-Man, which is the developer. The game released in September 7th in 2018, and being that it's been a month since release, I feel those who bought it have had enough time to beat it, so that you guys can now listen to the spoiler chat. So if you haven't beaten it, go get to it and come right back to listen to the spoiler chat. You have been warned. We're about to get started with Act 1 of this spoiler chat. And not only that, but this is the very first time in the Leveled Up Gamers podcast that we are doing a spoiler chat on a video game. So this is a Leveled Up Gamers first, right here. You're watching history happen. Yeah. Woo! Now, Act 1. So I'm going to sum up Act 1. It's very heavy on exposition, meaning they do a lot of introductions. So there's going to be a lot of summary happening here. Act 1 begins as an adult. So you're an adult Spider-Man with a job. With a job of being Spider-Man, of course. And now, I teach for a living. I have very minimal free time. But for that reason, I decided to change the difficulty setting to easy. And I played the whole game on easy, to be honest. I just wanted to beat the game. However, even though the game was uneasy, I was still dying a lot. And I'm going to be honest, I didn't like the game right away. The controllers felt confusing. I often didn't feel like Spider-Man was doing what I wanted him to do. And there was very little explanation as to how to defeat the enemies. However, this is one of the first few games that the more I played, the more I felt like I was actually becoming a better gamer. Not because I was leveling up my Spider-Man avatar, but because my fingers were getting used to the necessary dexterity of the controllers. Once I got past that, the game became one of the most memorable and enjoyable experiences of 2018. Now, the Spider Man game starts off on the highest peak of a roller coaster ride, and right away, you are thwarted into taking down Fisk, a big man who can literally hug you to death. After taking place in about, you can get to his or to this particular boss fight in about 15 to 30 minutes into the game, depending on how fast it takes you to learn the controllers. And through some dialogue and a few introductions of characters, we discover that Spider Man is already an experienced Spider Man and has been crime fighting for about 8 years, I believe. This game helps the game avoid the cliched origin story that plagues many superhero movies and games. Seeing as how popular Spider-Man has been in recently, I think the general audience and gamers and non-gamers alike, we know where Spider-Man comes from. We know how he gets his powers. We know that Uncle Ben is dead, so we don't have to go through that another time. So I really appreciated that from the developers of Insomniac. Now, I'm not an expert in Spider-Man lore. I'll be the first to admit that, but I only know what I've seen from the movies, and I do know. I can tell you this: Spider-Man has allied with NYPD, the New York Police Department. Particularly, his friend is Captain Yuri Watanabe. It's through her that Spider-Man goes to help take Fisk down, and eventually, after many of my personal deaths, we're able to bring him into custody, but not before he warns us that the bad people that there will be bad people who will rise to take his place. Kingpin claims that it's because of him that many of those baddies were kept in line, and I actually it ends up being true. So the game likes to show you us both flashbacks and progress in the story through skipping days ahead. So by fast forwarding a few days, we see Peter Parker is now working with Dr. Otto Octavius, who I recognize in the movies from the movies as Dr. Octopus. So in this version of Dr. Octavius, he is actually a friendly spider. He's actually a friendly human who is working with Spider-Man. That's what I meant to say. He's actually a scientist slash engineer trying to help humankind by making prosthetics. Aunt May, we discover, is working or volunteering at a place called FEAST, FEAST, which stands for Food, Emergency, Aid, Shelter, and Training. And her boss is Mr. Lee, a wealthy philanthropist who wants to help as many people as he can, but he has a sinister secret. Now, this secret is heavily hinted at when Mary Jane sneaks into Fisk's museum and is ambushed by some masked men. Of course, Spidey rescues Mary Jane and collects one of the masks and takes it to Lee, who is a mask expert. Wow, that's a mouthful. The mask belongs to Lee's secret gang called the Demons, so he downplays the importance. But it's during these events that we also discover that Peter Parker and Mary Jane are broken up but still occasionally communicate with each other. Now, if you make progress through the story, we also meet Miles Morales' father, a cop named Jefferson Davis. Spider-Man and he team up to take some demons down, only to have Officer Davis rescue Spider-Man. So finally, a human, a police officer, is able to rescue Spider-Man. We discover also that the mayor of New York is Norman Osborn, who wishes to honor Officer Davis with a medal. When things really kick off, Mr. Lee reveals himself as Mr. Negative, and by mind controlling several civilians and some government employees, he's able to get close enough to detonate a bomb that kills Officer Davis and many others that were in attendance. Now, all of that is the end of Act 1. So if you're up until this part in the game, we are going to talk a little bit about Act 1, then move on to Act 2. But wow, watching that explosion happen in City Hall at New York City, that was very impactful because the game released so close to the September 11 real life terrorist attack anniversary for us. So I didn't expect to see a bombing happen in a game that's set in New York, but it really made me focus more on the story because I was like, wow, I did not know that Spider-Man could get this dark. Okay, the rest of the game has you take turns being Spider-Man, Mary Jane, or Miles Morales. And it is at this point that we're now going to talk about Act 2. Now, in Act 2, Mayor Osborn, to protect himself, he hires an organization called Sable, who from the get-go are hostile towards Spider-Man, but they still try to work together. Additionally, Spider-Man is known for stopping threats in a non-lethal manner, whereas Sable they want to kill on sight. And I think that's where the conflict between the two quickly arise. And whenever they do try to work together, that relationship is very fragile because of that. You know, one Spider-Man wants to be non-lethal. Sable wants to shoot first, ask questions later. Dr. Octavius was receiving funding for his projects by Mayor Osborn, but after the funding is removed, Otto develops an anger towards the mayor. You could tell that he already had anger from the past, but it comes forth even further when his funding is removed, and this sets up the next part of the plot in motion, which is that Otto gets an alternate source funding for him to continue researching his prosthetics. Later on, we discover that these prosthetics he turns them into the metal arms. That is Doctor Octopus. Peter, in the process of helping Otto, discovers that his that Otto was building a chip or had built a chip to help move some of the prosthetics, but that this particular chip had the ability to alter his mind and take the primal instincts. The primal instinct in Doctor Otto takes over through that particular chip. But Peter does warn him. In the meantime, we also see that Spider-Man and MJ they work together to take down Mr. Lee, also known as Mr. Negative, who successfully steals a compound called Devil's Breath. This compound was being kept a secret by Mayor Osborn. But Spider-Man and Mary Jane work together. They are able to take him down rather quickly, actually. That happens in the second act. So I thought Dr. Lee or Mr. Negative was going to be like the main boss, but it ends up happening that he ends up taken to the prison, and I'm like, I wonder where this game is going to go with that. Mr. Lee makes a resurface when the following happens. Spider-Man gets an announcement that there's something happening at the Raft prison, that prisoners are escaping all over the place, and when Spider-Man finally gets there, we discover one of the most amazing game scenes that I've played ever, which is that he now has to fight all of these nemesis. He has to fight Scorpion, he has to fight Electro, he has to fight the Vulture, he has to fight Rhino, and then eventually he also faces Mr. Lee again, and I'm like, this is how Mr. Lee is able to gang up on Spider-Man. But towards the end, they all gang up on him. They beat him up. You get the feeling that Spider-Man is really close to death. And just before they're able to take him down, Dr. Otto makes his first grandiose appearance as Dr. Octopus. With his full-fledged 4 arms plus his 2 legs and his 2 hands, that makes a total of 8. And they knock Spider-Man out and unconscious. And they leave him for dead, but, of course we know that he doesn't die because the game must continue. Dr. Octopus then manages to steal the Devil's Breath again, and this time he successfully releases it into New York City. It is at this point that Mr. Lee, we discover, becomes just another pawn in Dr. Otto's scheme or plot. He takes a backseat and is no longer the main enemy, which I thought was a little disappointing, but also at the same time a very interesting twist, because Dr. Otto started being Peter Parker's friend, and then all of a sudden they are having to face each other off. So I really like that particular twist, although I really wanted to see more of Mr. Lee. And this is the end of Act 2. So if you are just finishing or in this part of Act 2, we're ready to move on to Act 3. Now in Act 3, Jonah J. Jameson, which if you know from the cartoons and from the comics and from the movies, is this very loudmouth person who always hates Spider-Man. He is the boss, or was the boss in the game. He's no longer the boss for the Daily Bugle. He has a podcast now. And he blames Spider-Man for letting things get out of control. It is at this point that the whole city of New York, once bright and beautiful, turns a dark and gloomy turn, with escaped inmates running around the streets and Sable now actively trying to kill Spider-Man. There's an added pressure to continue in the game because getting collectibles and doing side missions becomes way more difficult if you waited up until Act 3 to start getting those things. Because now every corner there's people shooting at Spider-Man. It's not as easy to travel as it was in the first 2 acts. It's one of the things that I appreciated about the third act is the change of scenery and the not so friendly neighborhood. The game pairs up each of the nemesis mentioned above into three different boss fights. We have Rhino and Scorpion, they pair up together. We have Vulture and Electro also are paired up. Mr. Lee, we have to fight him by himself, and the last boss is Dr. Otto Octopus. The fight with Rhino and Scorpion was repetitive but fun. For Rhino, you had to bring down some heavy items in his way as he was rushing at you, and he would hit his head against that, and while he was dazed and confused, he was open for attacks. For Scorpion, you had to throw webs at him until he was stuck enough for you to also punch him and use his own tail against him. Vulture and Electro's fight to me was particularly memorable because you could do the entire fight without ever having to touch the ground or sticking to a wall. So you were just swinging and then you were swing after swing after swing. It was an amazing fight. It was one of my most favorites. Mr. Lee's boss battle was actually the least fun of the boss battles for me because all you had to do was just swing in a circle until a triangle prompt popped up. You would hit triangle, and that was the opportunity for you to attack him. So I found that fight very repetitive and boring. But Dr. Octopus as the final boss was a great way to end the game. Before fighting Dr. Octopus, you are warned that you have one final opportunity to level up your character. So you can actually go to do side missions and level yourself up before the final fight. I recommend that you actually do take care of this. At least level up your web shots because those are very necessary in that fight. I did not level up my web shots and I ended up struggling even more. I was streaming the ending of the game, and I think I made that particular boss fight longer than necessary because I didn't pay attention to the warning and I didn't level up my web shots. In the end, though, when you defeat him, you and Dr. Octopus start having this conversation back and forth about who was right or who was wrong, and it's mainly about betrayal of trust and how Peter Parker would see Dr. Octopus as a father figure. You know, Peter Parker feels really let down by Dr. Octopus. But he beats him up just enough so that his machine doesn't work anymore by removing the chip that he had installed, and then leaves him there for the NYPD to come and arrest him. Also, it's sometime during this that we discover that Miles Morales was bitten by a radioactive spider that was in Mayor Osborn's office. That spider actually managed to escape by landing on Mary Jane's body. A bit far-fetched because it stayed on her body for several hours before it finally reached Miles Morales. I do let it slide though because that particular mission was a fun thing to watch. Mary Jane actually jumped off of a building. Spider-Man had just told her, "I'm not ready, I'm not there at you yet," but she still trusted him and jumped off, and Spider-Man managed to catch her. But at that point, the spider was already on her body and stayed in there, I guess, until Miles Morales came into the picture so that the spider could bite him. Now, in the finale of the Spider-Man game, we find that Aunt May, due to the Devil's Breath being released in New York City, was severely affected and is lying on a bed. We can tell that, well, it looks like she's going to die, and you are constantly questioning yourself: is she going to die? Is she not going to die? Unfortunately, an antidote cannot be made quick enough to save her, and she does end up passing away. And I remember saying, I don't want her to die, but she does. And I will admit, I teared up a little bit at seeing this scene because, you know, Aunt May, we know her from the movies. We know that she's like the sweetest aunt you could ever have. And what made me tear up a little more is that Aunt May reveals to Peter Parker that she knew that he was Spider-Man this whole time. That did make me tear up, but then afterwards I started thinking, you know, if she had told Peter Parker that she knew he was Spider-Man, Peter Parker would have so much less stress because he was always so stressed out the fact that somebody might find out who he was and then use his family against him. The city is cured, however, because they did manage to make antidotes for everybody in the city except for Aunt May, who didn't make it on time. She couldn't stay alive for a few more hours. And then everyone is cured. You know, they set up some centers. Several months later, Peter and MJ do get together again for coffee, only this time they finally kiss and decide to start dating again. Now, Miles Morales, he is not in the picture yet because we actually end up seeing him in the end credit scene. There are actually two end credit scenes. In the first one, we see that Miles Morales actually goes to Peter Parker's apartment, and we see that he is there to show him that he's been feeling a little bit differently, and he jumps up on the roof and stays there like Spider-Man. He shows him he has now Spider-Man like powers, and he says something along the lines of, "Isn't it strange?" And then Peter Parker decides to reveal that he is Spider-Man at that point, and also jumps on top of the roof and stays sticking there. And he says something like, "Well, maybe it's not so strange." So I really appreciated that line from Peter Parker. The second post-credit scene is where Mayor Osborn has his son. I don't remember his son's name, but he has him in a lab of sorts. But we don't really see his face, but we do see him behave or throw something against the glass that looks a lot to me like the powers that Venom should have, some sort of black goo. So I don't know, Insomniac is taking some liberties, and they're allowed to, especially now that they made a game that many people have come to love. It's quickly becoming a classic for future generations to look up to and enjoy. Or at least the powers that he threw look Venom-like to me. I'm not entirely sure. Like I said, I'm not a Spider-Man expert, so I don't know. I always thought he was the guy that with the Hobgoblin, but again, it's not my game. I didn't make it, so we'll see where that goes. I'm really excited, and I hope that the DLC will show more of that. If I had to rate this game, I would rate it a 9 out of 10. Initially, I thought it was an 8 out of 10. I remember posting it on some forums, but now I changed my mind after beating it, and I give it 9 points out of 10. It's not a perfect game, but it executes many things so well that it is definitely one of my most memorable experiences of 2018. And that does conclude our Spider-Man spoiler chat. For more Spider-Man chat, feel free to join our Discord channel, which again I will post in our Mixer live stream and also in the show notes. Now, we do have a Twitter at Leveled Up Gamers, and we also have an Xbox Gamers Club called Leveled Up Gamers. If you want to follow me, your host, on Twitter, you can find me at TROBADOUR_XP, and you can find me on YouTube as well, and also on Mixer. I have a Mixer channel that's separate from this one, that's also Troubadour_XP. Listeners, gamers, Leveled Up Gamers, I cannot thank you enough for being part of this community so early on. We're barely on our 12th episode, but I already see some people coming in and joining our community. And you guys are the ones that are helping me take this podcast to new heights, and we're going to grow together. So thank you for being here from the very beginning. From the very beginning. I cannot thank enough Star Catmeos, who is always constantly showing up. So I greatly appreciate you, Star. You're here. And I think you're one of the main reasons why I keep on doing this, because I know that at least somebody is out there listening. So big thank you. Big thanks. I cannot thank you enough. Everybody else, go out there, go level yourself up, and keep it true, which is true, respectful, original. I will catch you later.